My parents, Alco asterisk olics, B asterisk add an ab asterisk said me in childhood. When I founded a company, they came to my office and demanded a share of the company for good upbringing and sued me. I've never told anyone the whole story before, not like this. But I think it's time. The weight of the memories is too heavy to keep carrying on my own, and maybe, just maybe, someone out there will understand. I'm not sure what I'm looking for, advice, empathy, or just a place to put all this pain, but here goes nothing. Growing up, my life was a living nightmare. I know that sounds dramatic, but I mean it in the most literal sense. My parents, if you can even call them that, were the worst kind of people. To the outside world, they were just another couple trying to get by, but behind closed doors, they were monsters. My father, Tom, was a classic drunken bully, the kind you see in movies but hope to never meet in real life. He was big, loud, and cruel. When he drank, which was often, he turned into something even worse, an unpredictable beast who took pleasure in making others suffer. Then there was my mother, Linda. She was just as much of an alcoholic as my father, but her cruelty was different. She wasn't as physically violent, but she knew how to cut you down with her words. She'd get drunk and tell me how I ruined her life, how she wished she'd never had me, how I was nothing but a burden. The way she spoke to me was like a blade, slicing me open from the inside out. It's weird how words can hurt more than fists sometimes. Most nights my parents would drink themselves into oblivion. The house would fill with the sounds of shattering bottles, slurred arguments, and the occasional sickening thud of my father's fist meeting my mother's face, or worse, my own. I quickly learned how to make myself invisible, staying out of sight and out of mind as much as possible. But that didn't always work. Sometimes, I'd be dragged out of my hiding spot, just so they could remind me how worthless I was. I can still feel the sting of my father's belt, the way the leather would bite into my skin, leaving welts that would take days to heal. School was my only escape. It was the one place where I wasn't constantly afraid. I wasn't popular or anything. How could I be with clothes that barely fit and a body covered in bruises? But I found a small group of friends who made life bearable. It was like they could see through the mess that was my home life and recognize that I was more than just the broken kid from the wrong side of town. There was Sarah, the first real friend I ever had. She was kind, smart, and had a warmth about her that made people feel safe. Her family was the complete opposite of mine, loving, supportive, and genuinely happy. I never told her the full extent of what was going on at home, but she knew enough. She never judged me, though. Instead, she'd invite me over to her house whenever she could, offering me a few hours of peace that I cherished more than anything. Then there was Jake. He was rough around the edges, a bit of a troublemaker, but with a heart of gold. He knew how to fight, and he wasn't afraid to use that skill to protect those he cared about. We bonded over our shared love of video games and a mutual understanding of what it meant to come from a broken home. His father had walked out when he was a kid, and his mom worked 3 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. Jake was the one who taught me how to defend myself, how to throw a punch, and more importantly, how to take one. At school, the teachers were another unexpected source of support. I had a couple of teachers who seemed to know something wasn't right, even though I never said a word. Mr. Thompson, my math teacher, was one of them. He'd pull me aside after class sometimes, just to ask how I was doing. I'd always lie and say I was fine, but I think he knew better. He never pushed, just offered his office if I ever needed to talk. I never did, but knowing that the option was there meant more to me than I could ever express. And then there was Miss Carter, my English teacher. She had a way of making you feel like you mattered, like your thoughts and opinions were worth something. She encouraged me to write, to express myself through words instead of letting everything fester inside. I took her advice to heart, and writing became my lifeline, the one thing that kept me from drowning in the sea of misery that was my life. By the time I graduated high school, I was a master at hiding the pain. No one knew just how bad things were at home, not even Sarah and Jake. But despite everything, I managed to keep my grades up, thanks in no small part to the teachers who refused to give up on me. With their support and the encouragement of my friends, I applied to college. I didn't really believe I'd get in. I wasn't exactly a standout student. But to my surprise, I was accepted into a decent university a few hours away from home. Sarah and Jake were accepted too, and the 3 of us decided to stick together. We were determined to make a fresh start, far away from the toxic environment that had poisoned our childhoods. The day we packed up and left for college was one of the happiest days of my life. I could see the hatred in my father's eyes as I loaded the last of my things into Jake's beat-up old car. My mother didn't even bother to say goodbye, but I didn't care. I was leaving that hellhole behind, and there was no way in hell I was ever coming back. University life was like stepping into a different world. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe, like I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder. We found a small apartment near campus, pooling our money to make the rent. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and that made all the difference. We were free, or at least as free as 3 broke college kids could be. In college, I found the support I had been longing for my whole life. The professors were different from the teachers in high school. They treated us like adults, respected our opinions, and encouraged us to think for ourselves. I thrived in that environment, diving headfirst into my studies and making connections with people who actually cared about the same things I did. It wasn't long before I found a couple more loyal friends who became part of our little group. There was Mark, a computer science major with a knack for cracking jokes and making everyone laugh, even on the toughest days. And then there was Emily, a quiet but fiercely intelligent girl who could hold her own in any debate. Together, the 5 of us became a tight-knit group, supporting each other through the ups and downs of college life. But despite the newfound freedom, the scars from my past didn't fade as easily as I'd hoped. There were nights when I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the echoes of my father's rage still ringing in my ears. Sometimes, I'd see a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye and feel that old, familiar surge of fear, only to realize it was just a shadow or a trick of the light. The past had a way of creeping back in when I least expected it, reminding me that I could never fully escape the horrors of my childhood. But I refused to let it control me. With the help of my friends, I began to heal, little by little. We leaned on each other, shared our fears and hopes, and built each other up when life tried to tear us down. It was during one of those late-night brainstorming sessions in our cramped apartment that we came up with the idea for a business. It started as a joke, something we tossed around while procrastinating on our homework. But the more we talked about it, the more we realized we might actually be onto something. The idea was simple: create a platform that connected college students with local businesses looking for part-time help. We knew from experience how hard it could be to find a job that fit around a full-class schedule, and we figured there had to be a way to make the process easier. It was ambitious, maybe even a little crazy, but we were young and full of hope. We spent the next few months working on the concept, pulling together our different skills to make it a reality. Mark handled the technical side, building the website and app from scratch. Emily took care of the marketing, while Sarah and Jake focused on networking with local businesses. I found myself in charge of the financials and overall strategy, a role I never expected but quickly grew to love. By the time we graduated, our little side project had turned into something real. We had a small but growing user base, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. It wasn't enough to live off yet, but it was a start. More importantly, it gave us something to believe in, a reason to keep pushing forward even when things got tough. After graduation, we decided to take the plunge and move to a bigger city where we could expand the business. It was a huge risk, but we were all in it together, and that made it less terrifying. We pooled our savings, took out loans, and bought a small apartment that doubled as our office. It was cramped, chaotic, and more than a little stressful, but it was also exhilarating. We were doing something that mattered, something that could actually make a difference. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a future worth fighting for. The shadows of my past still lingered, but they were fading, replaced by the bright light of possibility. I had found my people, my purpose, and a life that was finally my own. And no matter what happened next, I knew one thing for sure: I would never go back to the darkness. Starting a business straight out of college was always going to be a challenge. We knew that from the start. What we didn't know was just how much the world was going to throw at us to test our resolve. The early days of our startup, ConnectLink, were filled with late nights and early mornings. The 5 of us, me, Sarah, Jake, Mark, and Emily, were all living together in that cramped little apartment, doubling as our office. We had barely enough space to move, let alone think. But we made it work. The energy was electric, the kind you only find when you're young and passionate about something bigger than yourself. But passion only takes you so far. We quickly learned that building a business isn't just about having a great idea. It's about navigating a minefield of challenges that seem to come at you from every direction. Our first major hurdle came in the form of a competitor. Out of nowhere, a new platform called Campus Hire popped up, doing exactly what we were doing, only with a sleeker interface and a larger marketing budget. They were backed by some big investors, and it didn't take long for them to start stealing our users. We were pissed, to say the least. All our hard work felt like it was slipping through our fingers, and we had no idea how to stop it. Jake, ever the hothead, wanted to go after them aggressively, slander them online, spread rumors, anything to take them down. But Emily, who had a more level-headed approach, suggested a different tactic. "Why don't we reach out to them?" she said one night, as we all sat around our makeshift conference table, which was really just our kitchen table. "Maybe there's a way we can work together." Jake scoffed. "Work together? Are you kidding? They're trying to put us out of business, Em." Or, Sarah interjected, "they're trying to do the same thing we are, help students. Maybe there's room for both of us." It was a long shot, but we didn't have much choice. So we reached out to them. To our surprise, they responded. Their CEO, a guy named Tom Wheeler, invited us to meet him and his team at their office downtown. It was nerve-wracking, walking into their shiny professional space, so different from our dingy apartment. But we were greeted with genuine smiles and a handshake from Tom himself. "Look," Tom said, cutting to the chase as we sat down in their conference room. "We're not here to crush you guys. We've been keeping an eye on ConnectLink, and we like what you're doing. In fact, I think there's a way we can help each other." We were skeptical, but we listened. Tom proposed an alliance. Campus Hire would focus on connecting students with part-time jobs in larger corporations, while ConnectLink would concentrate on smaller local businesses. We'd cross-promote each other, expanding our user bases and reducing the overlap. It was a risky move, essentially agreeing to give up part of the market, but it made sense. We didn't have the resources to compete head-on with them, but by working together, we could carve out a niche where we could thrive. Things were looking up after that. Our user base started to grow again, and with the support of Campus Hire, we were able to attract more local businesses to our platform. But just as we started to feel like we were gaining momentum, disaster struck. It was a Wednesday night, and we were all out celebrating a new partnership with a local coffee chain that had agreed to list all their part-time positions exclusively on ConnectLink. We'd been at the bar for a few hours when we got a call from Mark's phone. "Guys," he said, looking pale as he held his phone to his ear, "the apartment's been broken into." We rushed back home to find the door hanging off its hinges. Inside, the place was a wreck. Papers were strewn everywhere, our laptops were gone, and worst of all, the safe where we kept our backup drives and cash reserves had been ripped open and cleaned out. The sight was devastating. Everything we'd worked so hard for felt violated, like someone had reached into our lives and ripped out a part of us. "Who the hell would do this?" Jake yelled, kicking over a chair in frustration. "I don't know," I said, feeling numb. "But we need to call the police." The police came, took our statements, and assured us they'd do everything they could to find the culprits. But we weren't holding our breath. We knew how these things went. Chances were we'd never see our stuff again. It was Emily who suggested the next move. "We need to focus on what we can control," she said quietly, sitting down amidst the chaos. "We need to rebuild." We all looked at her, surprised by the calm determination in her voice. "Everything's gone, Em," Sarah said, tears welling up in her eyes. "How are we supposed to rebuild?" "We start with what we have," Emily replied, her voice steady. "We have each other, we have our skills, and we have our users. They didn't steal that. So that's what we did." Over the next few weeks, we worked non-stop to get back on our feet. We borrowed laptops, worked out of coffee shops, and slowly started piecing things back together. The support from our users and the businesses we partnered with was incredible. They rallied around us, offering whatever help they could, and slowly but surely, we began to recover. Just as we were starting to feel stable again, the economy took a nosedive. Inflation skyrocketed, and suddenly everything was more expensive. Rent, groceries, supplies, you name it. We were barely breaking even as it was, and now it felt like we were drowning. It was around this time that we started having serious discussions about diversifying our income. "We can't rely on ConnectLink alone," Mark said during one of our late-night strategy meetings. "We need to find other streams of income." Sarah nodded in agreement. "I've been thinking the same thing. What if we each start pursuing our own side projects? Things we're passionate about that could also bring in some extra cash." We all mulled it over. It was a risky move, dividing our focus when ConnectLink still needed so much attention. But the reality was, we couldn't afford to put all our eggs in one basket anymore. So we decided to give it a shot. Jake was the first to dive into a new venture. He'd always been passionate about fitness, and with the rise of home workouts during the pandemic, he saw an opportunity. He started a YouTube channel offering free workout routines and nutritional advice, monetizing through ads and sponsorships. It took off faster than any of us expected, and within a few months, he was making enough to not only support himself, but to reinvest some of the profits back into ConnectLink. Sarah, who had a knack for art, began selling custom illustrations and designs online. She opened an Etsy shop and started taking commissions for everything from portraits to logos. Her unique style quickly gained a following, and soon she was bringing in a steady stream of income as well. Mark, the tech genius of our group, decided to put his skills to use by freelancing. He started offering web development services to small businesses and startups, building custom websites and apps for clients who needed more than just a template. His reputation grew quickly, and before long, he had a roster of clients who kept him busy and well paid. Emily, ever the strategist, started a blog about entrepreneurship and small business growth. She shared our journey, offering advice and insights based on our experiences. Her writing resonated with a lot of people, and the blog became a popular resource for aspiring entrepreneurs. She monetized it through ads, affiliate marketing, and eventually, by offering consulting services. As for me, I discovered a passion for writing, something that had always been a hobby, but that I now saw potential in as a career. I started writing articles and essays for online publications, sharing my thoughts on everything from business to personal growth. It was therapeutic in a way, and also gave me a sense of purpose beyond just keeping ConnectLink afloat. As we each found success in our individual ventures, ConnectLink started to pick up steam again. The alliance with Campus Hire had proven to be a smart move, and together, we were able to dominate the student job market in our city. We even expanded into a few neighboring cities, slowly building a regional presence. But just when we thought we had things under control, another competitor emerged. This one much more ruthless than Campus Hire had ever been. They called themselves Job Mingle, and they weren't interested in working with us. Their goal was simple: put us out of business. Job Mingle launched an aggressive marketing campaign, undercutting our prices and offering deals to businesses that we couldn't possibly match. They started spreading rumors about ConnectLink, questioning our security after the robbery, and implying that we were on the brink of bankruptcy. It was a brutal smear campaign, and it started to work. Our user numbers began to drop again, and for the first time since the robbery, we were seriously worried about the future of our business. "We need to fight back," Jake said, his fists clenched in frustration. "We can't just let them get away with this." But fighting back wasn't going to be easy. We didn't have the resources to match their marketing spend, and trying to do so would only drain us further. It was Sarah who came up with the solution. "What if we turn their tactics against them?" she suggested one night, as we brainstormed ways to respond. "They're spreading lies about us. What if we focus on spreading the truth about them?" Mark raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, let's expose their dirty tactics," Sarah explained. "We reach out to the businesses and users who have been affected by their underhanded methods and share their stories. We show people that Job Mingle isn't the trustworthy, reliable company they're pretending to be." It was a risky move, but we were running out of options. So, we reached out to every business and student we could think of who had been screwed over by Job Mingle. We gathered testimonials, screenshots, and anything else that could prove their unethical behavior. Then we launched our own campaign, a truth campaign. It started with a blog post on Emily's site, detailing our own experiences with Job Mingle and highlighting the stories of others who had been wronged. We promoted the post heavily on social media, tagging Job Mingle and encouraging others to share their own stories. To our surprise, it worked. The post went viral, and within days, Job Mingle was facing a PR nightmare. Businesses started pulling their listings from their platform, students were deleting their accounts, and their user base began to shrink. But the real turning point came when Campus Hire, seeing the damage we'd done, decided to back us up. They released a statement condemning Job Mingle's tactics and reaffirming their support for ConnectLink. It was a huge boost to our credibility, and soon, the tide began to turn in our favor. Job Mingle tried to fight back, but the damage had been done. They eventually retreated from the market, and within a few months, they were gone completely. We had survived, and more importantly, we had learned how to fight smarter, not harder. As our business continued to grow, we realized we needed more help. The 5 of us had been handling everything on our own, but it was clear we couldn't keep up with the demand. So, we started looking for new team members, people who shared our vision and could bring fresh ideas to the table. One of the first people we hired was a marketing genius named Lisa. She had a background in digital marketing and had previously worked for a major tech company before deciding to strike out on her own. She was sharp, driven, and had an uncanny ability to spot trends before they happened. With her on board, we were able to launch a series of successful campaigns that brought in a flood of new users. Then there was David, a financial whiz who had worked in corporate finance for years before burning out and deciding to join a startup. He was a bit older than the rest of us, but his experience was invaluable. He helped us streamline our finances, cut unnecessary costs, and find new ways to maximize our revenue. With David's help, we were able to turn ConnectLink into a profitable business, something we hadn't thought possible just a few months earlier. Of course, with new team members came new dynamics. There were clashes of ideas, disagreements on strategy, and the occasional personality conflict. But we worked through it, learning how to communicate better and how to leverage each other's strengths. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. Just when we thought we had everything under control, life threw us another curveball. One day, out of the blue, I got a call from my father. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since the day I left for college. The sound of his voice sent a chill down my spine, and I almost hung up without saying a word. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was some deep-seated need for closure. Whatever it was, I stayed on the line. "I need to see you," he said, his voice rough and gravelly, like he'd aged 20 years since I last saw him. "What do you want?" I asked, my tone cold and distant. "It's your mother," he said after a long pause. "She's dying." I felt my heart skip a beat. Part of me wanted to laugh, to tell him that I didn't care, that they were dead to me already. But another part of me, the part that remembered the little boy who had once desperately wanted his parents' love, felt something else. Pity, maybe? Guilt? "I don't know why you're telling me this," I said finally. "We haven't spoken in years." "I know," he replied, and for the first time, I heard something in his voice that I hadn't heard before. Regret. "I know I wasn't a good father. I know we hurt you. But your mother, she's not the same person she was. She's been asking for you." I didn't want to care. I wanted to hang up, block his number, and forget this call had ever happened. But the truth was, no matter how much I had tried to forget them, they were still my parents. And as much as it pained me to admit it, I still cared. "I'll think about it," I said before hanging up. I didn't tell anyone about the call at first. I didn't want to open that can of worms, didn't want to revisit those dark memories. But the thought of my mother lying in a hospital bed, alone and scared, gnawed at me. Finally, after a few sleepless nights, I told Sarah. She listened quietly as I recounted the conversation, her expression unreadable. "You're not obligated to see them, you know," she said gently when I was done. "You don't owe them anything." "I know," I said, though my voice wavered. "But, I don't know. Maybe I need to do this. For myself." Sarah nodded, understanding. "Whatever you decide, I'm here for you." In the end, I decided to go. It wasn't an easy decision, and it wasn't one I made lightly. But I knew that if I didn't, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. The hospital was a dreary place, all sterile white walls and the faint smell of antiseptic. I found my mother in a small, dimly lit room at the end of a long hallway. She was a shadow of the woman I remembered, frail, pale, and hooked up to a dozen machines that beeped and whirred around her. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "You came," she whispered, her voice weak and raspy. I didn't know what to say. All the anger and hurt I had carried for so long seemed to melt away in that moment, leaving only a deep, aching sadness. We didn't talk much. She was too weak, and I was too overwhelmed. But in those last few hours, as I sat by her bedside and held her hand, I felt a strange sense of peace. Maybe it was forgiveness, or maybe it was just the closure I'd been seeking for so long. Whatever it was, it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. She passed away that night, her hand still in mine. I stayed with her until the end, saying goodbye to the woman who had hurt me so deeply, but who was also, in some twisted way, the only mother I'd ever had. In the days that followed, I found it hard to focus on the business. My thoughts were consumed by the past, by memories I had tried so hard to forget. My friends noticed, of course. They could see the change in me, the way I'd drift off during meetings or stare blankly at my computer screen for hours. It was Jake who finally pulled me aside one day. "You're not okay, man," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "And that's fine, but you can't keep going like this." He was right. I wasn't okay. I hadn't been okay for a long time, but I'd been too focused on the business, on moving forward, to deal with the pain that was still festering inside me. So I took some time off. It wasn't an easy decision. Connect Link was still growing, still facing challenges, but I knew I needed to step back and take care of myself. My friends were more than capable of handling things in my absence, and they insisted that I do whatever I needed to heal. During my time off, I threw myself into writing. I poured all my thoughts and emotions onto the page, letting the words carry the weight of my grief and anger. It was cathartic in a way, and slowly, I began to feel like myself again. I also sought out therapy, something I'd been avoiding for years. It wasn't easy, opening up to a stranger about the darkest parts of my life, but it was necessary. Through therapy, I started to understand that I couldn't change the past, but I could change how I let it affect me. I learned how to forgive, not just my parents, but myself as well. When I finally returned to Connect Link, I felt different, lighter somehow. The pain was still there, but it didn't consume me anymore. I was able to focus on the business with a clear mind, and I was ready to tackle whatever challenges came our way. And there were plenty of challenges. The economy was still volatile, inflation was still high, and new competitors were always lurking around the corner. But we faced them head-on, with the same determination and resilience that had gotten us this far. Our side projects continued to grow, bringing in extra income and allowing us to invest more into Connect Link. Jake's fitness channel became one of the top-rated on YouTube, and he even launched his own line of workout gear. Sarah's art business expanded into a full-blown brand, with her designs featured in several major retail stores. Mark's web development services were in high demand, and he had to start turning down clients just to keep up. Emily's blog evolved into a full-fledged online resource for entrepreneurs, and she started hosting workshops and webinars. As for me, my writing career took off in ways I never expected. I published a collection of essays, sharing my journey and the lessons I'd learned along the way. The response was overwhelming, and it opened up doors I never imagined: speaking engagements, interviews, and even a book deal. Through it all, Connect Link continued to thrive. We expanded into new markets, formed new partnerships, and became a leading platform for students and local businesses. The success was gratifying, but more than that, it was a testament to the power of friendship, resilience, and the determination to keep moving forward, no matter what life throws at you. Looking back, I realized that the journey we've been on, the highs, the lows, the unexpected twists and turns, has been about more than just building a business. It's been about building a life, one that is meaningful, fulfilling, and true to who we are. And as we continue to grow and evolve, both as individuals and as a team, I know that whatever challenges lie ahead, we'll face them together. Because in the end, that's what this journey has been about: finding our own way and doing it with the people who matter most. Just when I thought life had finally settled into something resembling normalcy, my past came crashing back into my life with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball. It started on a seemingly ordinary afternoon. I was in the middle of a meeting with Sarah, Mark, Jake, and Emily, brainstorming new ways to expand Connect Link's reach when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something made me pick up this time. "Hello?" I answered, my voice tentative. "Is this Michael?" A rough, gravelly voice responded, sending a shiver down my spine. I hadn't heard that voice in years, but I recognized it immediately. "Dad?" I breathed, my stomach dropping. "Yeah, it's me," he said, his tone carrying a strange mix of anger and desperation. "We need to talk." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. My father had never been one for talking, especially not when it came to anything important. Whatever this was, it couldn't be good. "I don't think there's anything to talk about," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's plenty to talk about, boy," he snapped. "You think you can just run off and leave us behind like that? After everything we did for you? Everything they did for me?" The nerve of this man was unbelievable. I could feel my blood boiling as the memories of my childhood flashed through my mind. Memories of beatings, insults, and a life of fear and misery. "You've got nothing to say to me," I said, my voice cold. "And I've got nothing to say to you." "Oh, you're gonna want to hear this," he growled. "Your mother and I were coming to see you. We've got some business to discuss." Before I could respond, he hung up, leaving me with a growing sense of dread. My parents hadn't been in my life for years, and that's how I wanted it to stay. The thought of them showing up out of nowhere, demanding something from me, filled me with a deep, gnawing anxiety. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, noticing the look on my face. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of panic that was settling over me. "No, not really," I admitted. "My dad just called. He and my mom are coming here. I have no idea what they want, but it can't be good." The room went silent as the others exchanged worried glances. They knew enough about my past to understand why this was such a big deal. "We'll be here for you," Emily said gently. "Whatever they're planning, you don't have to face it alone." I nodded, grateful for their support but still uneasy. Something told me this was just the beginning of a nightmare I thought I had left behind. A few days later, my parents showed up at our office. I had told the security guard downstairs to let me know as soon as they arrived, but I wasn't prepared for the wave of emotion that hit me when I saw them walk through the door. They looked older, more worn down than I remembered. My father, Tom, was still tall and broad-shouldered, but his once imposing figure had begun to stoop, and his face was lined with age and years of hard living. My mother, Linda, was a shadow of the woman I used to know. Her hair was gray, her skin pale and sallow, and there was a tiredness in her eyes that made her look much older than she actually was. "So this is where you've been hiding," my father said, his eyes scanning the office with a mixture of contempt and curiosity. "This is where I've been building my life," I corrected, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. My mother didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, looking at me with a mixture of sadness and something I couldn't quite place. Regret, maybe? "We're here because we want what's ours," my father said bluntly. I frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" "The company," he said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You wouldn't have any of this if it weren't for us. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. You owe us, and now it's time to pay up." The sheer audacity of his words left me speechless for a moment. How could they possibly think they had any claim to the life I had built? After everything they had put me through, the idea that they thought they were entitled to anything from me was beyond comprehension. "You've got to be kidding me," I finally managed to say, my voice shaking with anger. "You didn't raise me. You tortured me. You made my life a living hell, and now you have the nerve to show up here and demand something from me?" "We're your parents," my mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "We deserve something for all those years we spent taking care of you." "Taking care of me?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "You didn't take care of me. You abused me. You destroyed my childhood." "Enough of this," my father snapped, his temper flaring. "You owe us, and we're not leaving until you give us what we deserve." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was insane. "You need to leave," I said firmly, pointing to the door. "Now." "We're not going anywhere," my father said, crossing his arms over his chest. "We're taking this to court. You'll see. We'll get what's ours." I didn't even have a chance to respond before they turned and walked out, leaving me standing there in shock. A lawsuit? This couldn't be happening. But as the days went by and the reality of the situation set in, I realized that this was exactly what they were going to do. My parents were taking me to court, claiming that they were owed a share of my company because they had raised me. The weeks leading up to the trial were some of the most stressful of my life. My parents had hired a lawyer, and they were going after me with everything they had. They were accusing me of abandoning them, of refusing to support them in their old age, and they were demanding a portion of ConnectLink as compensation. It was absurd, of course. They had no legal ground to stand on, but that didn't stop them from trying to drag me through the mud. The media got wind of the case, and soon enough, there were headlines about the heartless son who had abandoned his parents after finding success. But I wasn't alone in this fight. My friends rallied around me, and we hired a top-notch legal team to defend me. We gathered evidence, testimonies from people who knew what my childhood had been like, and we prepared to fight back with everything we had. The day of the trial arrived, and I walked into the courtroom with my head held high, flanked by my friends who had become my family. My parents were there too, sitting with their lawyer, looking smug and confident. They had no idea what was about to hit them. The trial began, and their lawyer wasted no time in painting me as an ungrateful son who had turned his back on the people who had sacrificed everything for him. It was a sickening display of manipulation, and it took everything I had to keep my composure as I listened to their lies. But then it was our turn. Our lawyer, a sharp and experienced woman named Jessica, stood up and systematically dismantled their case. She presented the evidence we had gathered, the testimonies from neighbors who had heard the screaming and seen the bruises, the medical records from the times I had been taken to the hospital after a particularly brutal beating, the school reports from teachers who had noticed the signs of abuse. One by one, we brought in witnesses who testified about the kind of people my parents really were. Sarah took the stand, recounting the day she found me hiding in the bushes outside her house, covered in bruises after running away from home. Jake described the nights I would show up at his house, terrified and trembling, after my father had gone on one of his drunken rampages. Even Miss Carter, my old English teacher, testified, recalling how she had always suspected something was wrong but had never been able to prove it. The most damning testimony came from a doctor who had treated me as a child. He described the injuries I had sustained, the broken bones and bruises that were consistent with severe physical abuse. He explained that he had reported my parents to Child Protective Services multiple times, but nothing had ever come of it. As the evidence piled up, I watched my parents' smug expressions slowly dissolve into shock and anger. They had never expected this. They had thought they could bully me into giving them what they wanted, but now they were realizing that they had grossly underestimated me. The trial didn't last long after that. The evidence was overwhelming, and the judge saw right through their lies. In a scathing ruling, he dismissed their claims, stating that they had no right to any part of my company or my life. But he didn't stop there. He went a step further. declaring that my parents' actions had been so egregious that they warranted further legal action. He ordered an investigation into their treatment of me as a child, and within weeks, more evidence came to light. Evidence that they had lied to the authorities, falsified records, and neglected me to the point of criminality. The judge recommended that they be stripped of their parental rights and face charges for child abuse. It was a surreal moment, standing in that courtroom and hearing those words. I had spent so many years trying to escape from them, trying to bury the past, but now it was all coming to light. And for the first time, I felt like justice was being served. My parents were taken into custody right there in the courtroom. They were led away in handcuffs, their faces pale and drawn as they realized that their scheme had backfired spectacularly. They had come here to take something from me, but instead they had lost everything. They had lost. In the weeks that followed, I tried to process everything that had happened. It was a whirlwind of emotions: relief, anger, sadness, and a strange sense of closure. My parents had always been a dark shadow over my life, but now that shadow was gone, replaced by a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. The court awarded me their house as part of the settlement, a small, run-down place in the same town where I had grown up. I had no intention of living there, of course, but it was a symbolic victory, a way of reclaiming something that had been stolen from me. I went back to the house one last time, standing in the doorway and looking around at the place where so many terrible memories had been made. The walls were still the same dingy color, the floors still creaked underfoot, but it all felt different now. I wasn't a scared little boy anymore. I was a man who had fought back and won. I decided to sell the house, using the money to start a foundation for victims of child abuse. It felt like the right thing to do, a way to turn something ugly into something that could help others. My friends supported the idea, and soon enough, the Michael Foundation was up and running, offering resources, counseling, and support to kids who were going through the same kind of hell I had endured. Life didn't magically become perfect after the trial, but it did get better. With my parents out of the picture, I was finally able to focus fully on the future, on the business, and on the people who had stood by me through everything. ConnectLink continued to grow, expanding into new cities and attracting more users than ever before. We faced new challenges, of course. Every business does, but we tackled them together as a team. The experience had brought us closer, solidifying the bonds we had formed over the years. And as for me, I found a new sense of purpose in helping others. The foundation became a big part of my life, and I threw myself into it with the same passion I had once reserved for ConnectLink. It was hard work, but it was also incredibly rewarding, knowing that I was making a difference in the lives of kids who needed it. I also reconnected with my extended family, relatives I hadn't seen in years because of the distance my parents had created between us. They welcomed me back with open arms, and I found a sense of belonging that I had never really known growing up. One day, as I was sitting in the office, Sarah came up to me with a smile. "You know," she said, "we've been through a lot, but I think we're finally where we're supposed to be." I looked around at the team, my friends, my family, and nodded. "Yeah," I agreed. "We are." Just when I thought everything was settling down, life threw me one more curveball. It was a late afternoon, and I was wrapping up some paperwork when there was a knock on the door. I looked up to see a man standing there, a man I didn't recognize. "Can I help you?" I asked, standing up. The man stepped into the office, a serious expression on his face. "Mr. Michael Thompson?" he asked. "Yes, that's me," I replied, feeling a sense of unease. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to me. "You've been served," he said simply. I took the envelope, frowning as I opened it. Inside was a letter, an official-looking document that made my heart sink. It was from a law firm, representing someone I had never heard of before. They were suing me, claiming that I had violated a non-compete clause by starting ConnectLink. I sat down heavily, the weight of the situation crashing down on me. Just when I thought I had finally put the past behind me, here was another legal battle looming on the horizon. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I had faced down my worst fears and come out stronger on the other side. Whatever this was, I would deal with it. I wasn't alone anymore. I had my friends, my family, and the strength I had built over the years. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone, dialing Jessica's number. "Hey," I said when she answered. "I think we've got another fight on our hands." "Bring it on," she replied with a smile in her voice. "We've got this." And I knew we did, because no matter what life threw at us, we were ready. Together we could handle anything.